Good evening. Serendipity is one of my favorite words. First of all, it has 5 syllables, and that's among the biggest words I know. Second, I like how it rolls off my tongue. And third, it absolutely applies to tonight. About a year ago, I was watching TV, a national news program, and I saw this man being interviewed, and I said, God, he would be great for the forum. But how would you get someone you never met, known on national TV, to come to our little island? About 2 days later, I happened to meet for the first time Adam Burr. I happened to say that I'd seen this speaker, and he said, I know him. And I said, would you invite him, and would he come? And yes, and I don't know, but maybe. And so if that isn't serendipitous, I don't know what is. So let me bring Adam down to do a proper introduction. Now, Adam Burr, you might know, is Kristen Burr's husband. So.
I get that a lot. So hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. And let me just be very brief. Bruce told me to keep it tight. So we've got Michael Roth with us tonight. Michael has been the president of Wesleyan University, my alma mater, his alma mater, this is his 20th year. He was actually president of another university that we won't mention. So he has been a university president for 27 years. Michael is a unique person. You'll see that when he gets up here. He's actually an active professor, still teaches, which is quite unusual for university presidents. I recommend his course, Vice in Virtue, which is still on Coursera. He is a prolific author, many books. He appears in all sorts of media, is a big believer in dialogue, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. He's been on Sam Harris's podcast. Personally, and I learned this last night, I am really looking forward to him being the invited guest next week, next Friday, on Bill Maher's show. So you can watch him again on national TV. It is HBO, Bruce, so I hope you have it. Michael has been a very thoughtful and outspoken defender of universities and colleges and how important they are to our democracy. And in 2025, he actually won the Penn Award for Courage for his stance against government encroachment on higher education. So please, I think I warmed up the crowd, Michael. So please join me in welcoming Michael Roth.
Thanks very much. I know you have, there's a very deliberate schedule here so that I shouldn't fall off the stage and delay anything. I know we have I think there should be about 30 minutes of me talking, and then there'll be about a similar amount of time for you to ask me questions, which I am, after 27 years of being a college president, I can really avoid almost any question you ask me. So I'll do my best, and I think I'm going to just come down there. I spoke recently at the Monterey, Massachusetts Community Center, which is the town we live in when we're not on campus, and so I gave a talk recently in that it's a church, a former church, now a community center in Monterey, and I was thinking about it because I had done had a conversation at Chesterwood in the Berkshires and at the Red Lion Inn, a different occasion, and all of these places seem to me so vital for what I'll call the ecosystem of American democracy. And what I mean by that is Chesterwood, which is a historic museum for in the southern Berkshires, and many of you know the Red Lion Inn has been there. It's older than the United States. All these places promote community in ways that are not reducible to partisan politics. And what I've been talking about over the last year and a half or so is the way in which the federal government's recent activities against attacks on universities and colleges in the United States is really an attack on civil society. And I think that's important because civil society is this. It's a community center. It's Chesterwood. It's the Red Lion Inn. It's public schools. It's libraries. It's places that exist because of the allegiance of those who participate in the activities at those centers. They don't exist because of their political loyalty to whoever happens to be in power. When you have an authoritarian regime, that regime cannot abide organizations that don't express loyalty to the folks in power. That's, I think, almost a definition of authoritarian regimes, is that they coordinate, or the current word that's even the MAGA people use, they have alignment with all the organizations and the central power. In America, conservatives have known this forever. In America, our freedoms have depended on our ability to not be overly centralized, as in many European countries. That the community center here, the community center in Monterey, Massachusetts, or in Wichita, or I spoke at the City Club in Cleveland, that all of these places exist because they perform a service for their members. People show up on a Sunday afternoon. It's like cocktail hour, right? I mean, and here you are, sober, I'm told, and willing to listen. And you do this for 40 years, I think it said. And so the assault on higher education by the White House over the last year and a half is, I think, an assault on civil society. And so I say it that way. Why? Because a lot of you have doubts about colleges and universities. Maybe we deserve it. Maybe we deserve the assault. Maybe Harvard is bad in some way. Maybe Wesleyan is too weird for you, right? Or maybe Williams is too rich. That's clearly the case. And so you might not be moved to jump to the defense of faculty members who are teaching things that you think are wrong or just are incomprehensible, or because students are behaving in ways that are stupid. So you may not be leaping to their defense, but I think you should be, we should be in the United States, because the assault on higher education is an assault on these kinds of spaces, I think. Places that don't have to express loyalty to whoever is in power. And so I think that the issues around academic freedom are not just of concern to academics. So when people go to college, in my view, they should get three things, whatever college they go to. They should discover what they love to do. They should get better at it. And they should learn how to share what they've gotten better at and they love to do with others. And that often means selling what they've gotten good at and they still find meaningful in the marketplace. And colleges and universities, they could be liberal arts schools, they could be research universities, they could be more vocational. However they orient themselves, I think that those colleges and universities should promote these three dimensions of a young person's experience. Discovering what you love to do, which means at a place like Wesleyan, having a curriculum that encourages people not just to take classes in something they've been told they're good at, but to explore things that they never thought they'd be interested in. And they do that, for the old-fashioned reasons, is that they'll talk, Fred will talk to Amy, and Amy will say, oh, you should take this course in film from Scott Higgins. We have a film major here from Wesleyan. You should take this course from Scott Higgins because he's a great teacher. And you say, well, I'm not really interested in film. And you say, well, you're at Wesleyan, you should take a film class, because Wesleyan, in case you haven't heard, has got the best film department of any undergraduate-oriented school in the country. And so, just a little propaganda. I've been told I'm allowed a little propaganda. I'm allowed one Williams joke. You'll hear an Amherst joke before the day is over, and some propaganda. But you would want to take that class. And then you take that class and you say, hey, I'm really interested in film in a way that I didn't realize I was. Or at Wesleyan, it's likely to be ethnomusicology, let's say. Or it could be physics or astronomy. And so what happens is you discover things that are meaningful to you in a way that incites your energy, your interest, your capacities for work. And then when you discover that and have these capacities incited, exercised, the task of a college or university then is to really make you work much harder than you thought you would want to work. After all, college is now billed as a place for fun, for having a great experience. I think, and I tell this to Wesleyan students all the time, I don't care if you have fun. You're 20. Some of you like being miserable, you know. It's cool, you know. Oh, man, the world. And others are, you know, rah, rah, rah. That's fine. I care that you work really hard at something you find meaningful, so that you get so good at it that when you're ready to graduate, somebody's going to say, I want you on my team. Not because I need an astronomer on my team, but because your analytic capacities and ability to make sense out of data that other people find meaningless are so great that I want you on my team. And that you want to be on that team because that allows you to continue to exercise those capacities. You've gotten really good at it, and now you're sharing that in a broader way. Now, all of that I've described in a little book, which is not for sale right outside the door, but what could be purchased online. How's the internet connection? No, it's called The Student, A Short History. I've described these things in this book as ways of practicing freedom. That what happens when you're a student, when it works, it doesn't always work perfectly. But when it works, what happens is you're practicing being free. And this is so important to me as a teacher, that, you know, there are times when you're doing work and it really feels like work. You know, you have to push yourself. It's toil. You see, you're being punished. And there are times when you're working where you don't see the time go by at all, where you're absorbed, you're focused, you're maybe excited, or you're just doing something that is meaningful to you. And when that second thing happens, when you're working really hard at something you find meaningful, that I think and I'm not alone in this is the great tradition in Western philosophy since the 1700s, this is a kind of freedom. However, when you practice freedom and you're 20 years old, guess what? You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to do bonehead things. You're going to say things that old people don't like. Even if you're right, they may not like them. Especially, actually, if you're right. They may not like them. So, in authoritarian regimes, the tendency is to go after universities and colleges because people are learning to be more free as they're learning about physics or English literature or philosophy or mathematics or what have you, or film. Because authoritarian regimes can only abide freedom when the freedom is in the service of loyalty to the central power. And so over the last year and a half, I have been defending colleges and universities against the government assault on their independence because, not because I like the schools so much. I mean, I didn't get into Harvard. So like a lot of people, I could say, oh, yeah, they're getting it. They're getting it. I could be like Vanderbilt. That's a joke. You should laugh. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow. That's very instructive. A Williams joke works, a Vanderbilt joke doesn't. Okay. I'll make a note of that. I think that the assault on these freedoms is so dangerous for our democracy, not because I like Harvard or Columbia, but because I fear a successful assault on colleges, universities, like the successful assault on law firms or on media companies or on newspapers, will lead to the erosion of values across our democracy. And that's why I'm trying to talk more to not just like a Wesleyan audience where, or college and university audience where people have a certain political disposition, but to talk to conservative audiences, people who have a different view of American freedom and decentralization than, let's say, someone on the left. Because I do fear that one of the things that's happened over the last year is that we've gotten used to the erosion of values we used to think of as core to the American experiment. We've gotten used to the degradation of free speech. We've gotten used to corruption at a level that's extraordinary by any standards. We've gotten used to government overreach. I was just reading about Brown made a deal with the federal government, and I was just reading about the prosecutors who were involved in the investigation of Brown. They could find no violations. They could find no violations, so they were moved off the case. Because Brown is going to make a deal whether they've done anything wrong or not. Why? Because it's just too expensive to fight the government. Now, that's Brown, which is very wealthy. It's not Williams, but I'll pander to you. If you like the Williams jokes, I'll tell 7 or 8 of them. I don't mind. But they made a deal because otherwise, like Harvard has won in court, but the money has just not been coming in. Contracts are not being paid, even though the money is owed to the university for work they have done. And so schools are afraid of the government. I mean, that is, even that we've said, of course they are. That, to me, I mean, it's so crazy. I grew up on Long Island. My father was a furrier. His father was a furrier. They were committed to one thing, that I would not be a furrier. If the young people in the room, if there are any, okay, a furrier is someone who makes fur coats. My father used to tell me, if a cop bothers you, and they will, that's my dad, no radical. If a cop bothers you on the street when you're drinking your root beer and eating your Twinkie after playing basketball, ask for his badge number. It's your right as an American. I'm like 10 years old. Sit with my friends with our bicycles, playing, we have to play basketball, and the cops will come along. This is what you do on Long Island. Move along, kids. I say, what? What's your badge number? And because I guess I wouldn't have thought of it then. I thought it was my right as an American. Now I was realize it's a white middle-class guy in Long Island. The cop would, he'd show me his badge off, and he'd say, now move the heck along. And we moved along. But I grew up thinking, oh, yeah, you're not the boss of me. I had good old American attitude. You're not the boss of me. And we've gotten so used to, in a short time, to the government saying, we're going to tell you what to do because we can. Because fighting the government when it doesn't obey its own rules is extraordinarily difficult. But fight we must if we're going to protect our democracy. So in the spring, it's early spring, in March, I guess, I wrote a piece that was in the New York Times about Freedom Summer, which was in 1964, and how there were these Wesleyan people who went down to Mississippi to register voters in 1964. And when I was a student at Wesleyan in the 70s, these were like our heroes. We heard about these stories, and this old fuddy-duddy professor by 1976 or so. 10 years before, he was a radical on a bus to Mississippi, taking students there. And I was thinking about them it was MLK Day, actually. And I read an interview with one of these students who had gone to Mississippi and became a very distinguished judge in California, Len Edwards. And he said it was a life-changing experience. His friends were murdered. He was arrested 5 times. And I thought to myself, here I am, speaking like I'm speaking to you guys. We should defend our democracy. But writing for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. But it's like, compared to what they did, what am I really doing? So I started to put together a group of schools and other organizations around the country that would encourage young people to participate in the coming elections. We called it Democracy Summer, or Democracy 250, if it goes beyond the summer into celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration. And the idea is to get students from, Wesleyan, it's easy to get people to get involved in politics. It's usually to protest me, but even to get involved in larger political issues. But we wanted people at UT Austin and at University of Michigan and at the big schools to have students go work on the campaign of your choice. Could be the race for sheriff. It could be a school board. It could be Congress. And of course we're totally agnostic politically. We don't care who they work for. We've raised some money to give people stipends to go and work on campaigns, or to be poll watchers in precincts that are under duress or seem to feel they are under duress in the coming election. And the idea was pretty straightforward: to get students to defend democracy by participating in it. Young people can be extremely cynical about our political system. We can be politically cynical about it. But when they're motivated, when they get excited about a candidate, you've seen this in Maine, and you've seen what happens when it's reversed. But when they get excited about a candidate and want to participate in the public sphere, that, to me, gives me hope for democracy. Gives me hope that there are vehicles for not just protecting colleges and universities, but protecting our right to vote, protecting journalism, protecting the independence of law firms and media companies. Because I do think all of these things are interconnected. Now, you say, oh, that's fine, Michael Roth, president of Wesleyan University, you think these thoughts. So why hasn't that message resonated more with your own university colleagues, the other college presidents? Colleges and universities are attacked, and they make deals or they don't make deals, but there's very little collective action from higher education. And the reason is straightforward, I think. It's because people are afraid to have the government in their business, to have a retribution, which is one of the favorite activities of the current administration. And so they prefer reticence. As one of my colleagues said, without any sense of shame, in a meeting with many other college presidents, our policy is not to be the tallest blade of grass. I was shocked. This is a very nice person, very smart. She's probably to the left of me, I guess, politically. I don't know. But she was saying to the rest of us, I hope they cut your head off. That's what she's saying. That's what it means. And so I think the title I gave to Adam, I'm not sure if we used it or not, it was a James Bond reference. It was Shaken But Not Stirred, University Leadership. We're all queer. We're all queer. It's a James Bond, the martini shaken, not sir, vodka martini. I learned. I had to go look it up. But they're all shaking. When I forgot. There was collective action. How could I forget? What was that about? Money. Right? There was collective action when schools were facing an endowment tax. In the face of an endowment tax, there was a lot of cooperation to find ways to not have to pay it. I'm grateful for that. We don't have to pay it. But it's totally possible to motivate academic leadership when it comes to money. But I think we should be motivating college professors and college students and high school teachers to be involved in our democracy to protect our freedoms. Not because they're going to make more money doing so, but because I want to live in a democracy where I can tell my grandchildren, ask for the badge number. You're allowed to sit on the street. They cherish the freedoms you have in the country to speak your mind, because they can be taken away. To me, the most harrowing, the most frightening moment of the last year was watching the poor kid at Tufts get abducted off the street. Why? Because she wrote an op-ed. And because she's Muslim. But she wrote an op-ed. So she's grabbed off the street. Now, I have a daughter around that age, so, it made me hit home. And I see that image every time I think about why keep trying to defend these freedoms is because I don't want to live in a country where you can be just taken off the street because of something you wrote. You don't want to live in a country like that. I mean, I thank you, but I mean, I got this Courage Award from Penn, which made me very anxious, actually very nervous, because I'm like a nervous guy from Long Island. When I have a friend who's a poet. He said, if somebody offered me a Courage Award, I'd duck. And I was like, I just think this is what you're supposed to do in America. Now, I have friends who see themselves on the left, who think of themselves as radicals, and they say, oh, but no one's ever had freedom. No one's. And I understand that line of thinking. I understand it very well. I've heard it a lot. But I have another colleague who's from Ethiopia at Wesleyan. She's a great novelist, Mazda Mengistu. And I told her, well, we'll fight this stuff. We'll fight this stuff. And if they try to stop us, we'll fight them in court. And she smiled at me. She's very sweet. And she said, that's nice. You're such an American. I said, what do you mean? She said, in my country, you'd fight it, but you'd fight from jail. Now, that's courage. Because I imagine myself fighting from the Bill Maher show, or here, talking. But if we don't want to be in a situation where we can be abducted for what we say, for what we write, I think we have to defend the rights of colleges and universities to admit who they want, to teach how they want. We have to take a deep breath when they do stupid stuff. We can criticize what they do, what they say, but we shouldn't try to keep them from speaking. I mean, it is a very great gift to this country that we have a higher education sector in which young people can practice being free. I just want to make sure, and I'm sure you want to ensure that when college students graduate, they have a chance to use their freedom, not lose their freedom. Thank you. Hi. Oh, this is the question period. Yes, sorry. I think you were waving.
As you know, Linda McMahon sent all of you quite a letter on October 2nd. And though it was a call to action to university and boards to state, and you can explain it better than I will, some of the things were like academic rigor, intellectual diversity, affordability, like things that everybody probably should want in a school. But as a leader in this, how are schools to draw the line between legitimate accountability and allowing the federal government to define what the university should fulfill and do? And I think that's a really complicated question.
No, it's a very
I don't want to put you on the spot. on what Wesleyan should do. But I'm just
it's
curious.
fine. We can maybe come up with something for our website right here in this room. Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, and the wrestler, the wrestling CEO. So she sent a letter in the last week or so to colleges and universities demanding that we make clear certain things about admissions, about our views of meritocracy and various things, many of which were pretty unobjectionable. And there's been some discussion among college presidents about how to do that and not capitulate to governmental overreach. It does seem to me that every president has the right to interpret civil rights statutes in ways that have an effect on colleges and universities. In the Obama-Biden years, they redefined how sexual assault claims were to be adjudicated on college campuses. Some of the things they demanded, I thought, were inappropriate, but they had the right to make those demands as interpretations of statutes, I think. And the Trump administration has the right to interpret statutes. They don't have the right to make stuff up. They don't have the right to, in my view, to do what they've done in the last direction from the Office of OMB, Management Budget, saying that if your grant, which has been approved by, let's say, the quantum computing experts on the scientific panel, your grant has been approved by them, but it will be refused because it is not in accord with, this is the quote, the priorities of the president. Not of the country, not even the government, of the President of the United States. It's extraordinary. And that seems to me just wrong-headed and an abuse of power. These other things seem to me that they're matters of law. I think, as a university president, I have to obey the law of the land. So, the next example I know of is around affirmative action. I disagreed with the Supreme Court decision, but I'm not on the Supreme Court. I have to abide by the Supreme Court decision. So we don't do any affirmative action at Wesleyan. And we used to, and we believed in it, and we still believe in it, but we can't do it because it's against the law. That's also something my parents told me. You don't always get what you want. And so we obey those rules. The NCAA has a rule about trans people playing sports. We obey those rules. And at the same time, we are trying to be mindful of efforts of the government to insinuate itself into the operations of the university in ways that would compromise academic freedom, given the context. So the letter from the Secretary of Education is not all that bad. It has some things in it that are bad, I think, but not all that bad. However, I don't think of that in isolation from everything else. A good friend of mine, who I hugely respect, Danielle Allen, who's a professor at Harvard and a great author, she wrote a piece like, this is what the Secretary of Education should do, and we have to respect that. And I would, if this was the first thing that came out from the administration, I would agree. But in this context, I think we have to be very careful about not creating a precedent for the administration to try to seize more control.
A serious question and a non-serious question. First, what did the founding fathers say and put in the Constitution about higher learning and state versus whether or not the state can interfere with higher learning?
Well, I am not. There's got to be a lawyer in the house. Here we are, in New England. So I don't know exactly what the Constitution. I'm trying to think of a specific passage. There is a body of case law, and derived from constitutional principles, especially in the 20th century, that protects colleges and universities with a kind of variant on free speech doctrine that gives academic freedom a kind of a professional arena of operation, that the government should not interfere with. And the best book on that I know, is David Raban has this big book from Harvard University Press called Academic Freedom, came out a couple of years ago. But if you want a quick one, Lee Bollinger has a little book called, I think, What is University For, or something like that. No, University, A Reckoning. And it's in 30 pages, he distills some of the constitutional principles that protect academic freedom. It seemed to me that someone like George Washington really wanted, he wanted a national university that would be a beacon for scientific work, but not controlled by the government. And of course, Thomas Jefferson, in founding University of Virginia, was very clear that he wanted a school where liberal arts could flourish without, on their own, not with interference either from ecclesiastical authorities, church authorities, or from the government. And your non-serious question?
Did I see you at the Dark Harbor shop today?
What happens at the Dark Harbor shop stays at the Dark, I've been told. So. All the way in the back, yes.
I received my education, my political education at Barnard, and I really mourned the experience that I was able to have as Columbia has become more authoritarian in its repression of students and faculty. And something I'm not hearing you talk about is the foundation of the American university and you can dispute this, but elitist and extractivist, and it's something that I've benefited from immensely, and I value my university education so much. But I just wonder how you respond to, and also I feel like Columbia made a choice not to sit on its endowments and capitulate. There was an option there to capitulate or not, but I wonder how you would respond to perhaps the American university not being as fertile a ground for fighting for democracy, given that there are authoritarian tendencies in university administration and bureaucracy?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, an important question. I think the history of the American university is filled with bad actions and irresponsible decisions, and it's probably the most fertile place for the practice of democracy in this country. In other words, like democracy itself, it's not a great system, except it's better than all the other systems. And I don't think you could find a more successful sector of American culture or economy than the university. And people choose to go to Barnard or Columbia, I suppose, because of its success in extracting value from others and providing a prestigious degree to its students. And I don't criticize them for making that decision. But I do think that, I don't know if this analogy works perfectly, but I do so if you have one of those big houses here on the island, owned by a very wealthy person, who probably didn't get all their money by doing charitable things, and they have a kid kidnapped. You say, well, I don't know. Do they? Do you say, I understand why someone kidnapped the kid? I don't say that. I think that's a mistake. I think it's a political mistake. I think it's a moral mistake. And so I do think that colleges and universities have a lot to answer for, both in general terms and then very specifically, like in the last few years, things that have happened. And I think we should work to improve colleges and universities. I fear with the government intervention, it'll make them worse, not better.
Yes. Hi, thanks for coming and talking. I had a kid in college in the last 4 years. Wonderful education he got. And during the post-October 7th protests, when there was protests, I'm very liberal. I've taught my kids, you protest, you get in, you abide by the law, but really stand up. But then the president called in the National Guard. And and so suddenly I'm looking at the kid and the big National Guard, and my husband and I, who you know, both went, go back to your dorm, right? So when you're talking about courage, well, as a parent, and
Don't don't criticize your husband in public.
No, but like, here's the thing, it's like everything, and it's across a lot of different arenas, has been ratcheted up so much that it's, as my late father said, yeah, but now there's not personal, like go protest, but now there's personal risk.
Yeah.
In a way that never has been. So as a president, like how are you?
It's a great question. Yeah. It's protest is not risk free. It never has been. I mean, I encountered the National Guard at Seabrook, New Hampshire. At an anti-nuclear protest with the Yellow Rose Life Force anarchist group from Texas that a friend of mine was in, and you got. Those were not exactly legal protests either, so they were borderline. It's risky. A student government at Wesleyan said to me, "How could you encourage people to go register folks to vote? Couldn't that be dangerous?" And I said, "Well, it could be. It's not like 1964 when it was, and people were murdered for registering black people to vote. And if they hadn't done it, the system never would have improved, or wouldn't have improved when it did." And so I do think there are risks. We try to tell our students that you can make your voice heard in ways that don't incur the same risk as in other ways. So we have rules about time and place restrictions. If they're violated, students are punished. They don't like that. That's what their rules, and their rules are capacious, I think. So there's plenty of room for free speech, and then there'll be other students who say, that's not free speech, that's hate speech, which is not really a thing in the Constitution. It's not a thing at all in the Constitution. And they didn't like what the students were chanting. I didn't like what they were chanting, but that's not really relevant. They have a right to chant. You don't have a right not to be uncomfortable. It's not a right. You don't have a right to not be offended. And so at times, like after October 7th, there was, to my mind, a disgusting display of anti-Semitism all across the country, a dubiously informed effort to use a certain settler colonial theory to discredit not the United States or Canada or many of the countries in this hemisphere, but to discredit just one country, and that is Israel. And there were students who were exercised because people were being massacred by the thousands. So as a president, I was really glad that the students were protesting something they found so morally offensive. If they had just said, I can't protest because I need an internship, which is not on, I don't want to get my picture taken and get doxxed by a Wall Street company. I've admired not the content of the protest, but their moral outrage. And I also admired the way they did it at Wesleyan, which was not to create a situation where Jewish students or other pro-Israel students felt they couldn't go wherever they wanted to go. And none of that happened. It was not pleasant if you were a pro-Israel person to hear things chanted that you didn't like. But again, that's not your right is not to avoid unpleasantness. So I think students need to take risks. If you're in politics, you take. There are risks that you could take. Now, you've heard this from commentators that this is a generation that's been coddled, that safetyism has infected the way we've raised our kids. You give a kid, they say, why is there grade inflation? You give a student a C+ at Wesleyan, and the grandmother calls you. Not the mother. The mother's a second call. How could you do this? How could you do this to his future? And I always say, I didn't do it. He's the C+. And they think I'm like from another planet because they've raised their kid. You've raised your kids, your grandkids, so that they should always be comfortable. And this is, I think right now, this is time we have to embrace the discomfort of standing up for our rights. I don't encourage recklessness. I mean, in the classical tradition of moral philosophy, there's a difference between courage and recklessness. And I think, and I try to be very careful about standing up for things that are in the core set of American values, generously conceptualized, and to mitigate some of the risk. But you can't mitigate all of the risk, in my view. And so sometimes you get arrested. Sometimes the National Guard, you can, but I think you, like in all other things, you have to pick your battles and try to do things that will be effective given the risk you're willing to run. Yes?
So in this divisive society that we live, where you essentially hate somebody who disagrees with you, or at least strongly shun them, and there's no talking, what kind of role do you think the university could play with that? Because I think that that attitude is very destructive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think here universities have failed in many ways, not all, and it varies a little bit, but the kind of promotion of doctrine at universities, political and moral doctrines, on campus, I think has been an educational disservice to students. So I think in 2016 or so, 15 or 16, I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal calling for an affirmative action program at colleges and universities for conservatives. And no one liked this op-ed. I mean, my progressive friends were like, how dare you? You sully the words affirmative action with the word conservative. They didn't actually talk much about affirmative action then. They were hoping that, because no one liked it, actually. And the conservatives said, we don't need affirmative action, we just need a meritocracy, but my point was that we have these biases of hiring people who think like we think. And so we think, oh, they're really smart, they're like me, And it's so obvious that once you start, wasn't obvious to me till a friend pointed this out, but once you see it, you see this bias again and again. And I think intellectual diversity on college campuses is really important. The fact that the Trump administration now is pushing that makes it harder for me to continue my work doing it, but I do think it's really important. And it doesn't mean you hire any bozo, you don't hire a Nazi or something, but you do want students and faculty to hear lots of different points of view. One of the reasons you want them to hear different points of view is because you get to realize that someone who disagrees with you is really a nice person. And they're really interesting to talk to about other things. And you don't have to judge them. So I teach this virtue and vice class starting next week or so. And we read Aristotle and Aquinas and Machiavelli and Jane Austen. And we read queer theorists in the contemporary world. But we also read Nietzsche and the conservative critics of bourgeois society. And over time, the students, they have to entertain points of view that they thought were not even, they were not worthy of consideration. I try to make them worthy of consideration so that they get used to talking across differences in ways that advance their learning. Not just to say, well, I talked to a guy who thinks the earth is flat, I'm really great now, but that advance their learning. Because I think you're absolutely right. Outside of college and university, segregation by class and race in the United States is gotten much worse in many respects. There's more intermarriage at class. There's especially by educational class, but on college and university campuses, where you have kids who have no resources at all, you have other people who's got their family name on the building, you have people from all over the country at the great schools. You have a chance to actually meet people who don't think like you. And I did this other piece paper from the newspaper saying, choose a school where you don't fit in. I mean, guidance counselors say, find a school where you'll feel at home. Nonsense. Find a school where you're uncomfortable, Mom. You find a school where you don't fit in, because you learn so much more from people who don't agree with you. David French had this piece in the Times this morning, I think, about that, about going to Harvard as a conservative Christian. He says, I became a better Christian and a better conservative because I had to defend my ideas. And he also established the ability to talk to people who are not conservative Christians. And that, I think, is a way of also practicing freedom.
This might be a good follow-on with that question. I had the good privilege to walk precincts with my godson back before the election outside of Philly, and felt pretty good about things for Harris, and of course things went the other way. But on my ride home in the Times, reading the Times, the Sunday Times, there was a piece about a rural community outside of Philly, and the father said, "I don't want to send my kid to college because he might come back a liberal."
Yeah.
And it followed on. Of course, you hear that from Trump speeches and all the folks that are McMahon and others basically saying we've got to find a way to get after liberal education. How is there a way to stop the vilification of liberal thought? I mean, whether it be liberal and classic liberal anyway. I'm not trying to say all universities be liberal. They need to be, I think they need to be, like you're suggesting, all levels of thought across the spectrum.
Yeah.
How do we get around this craziness that they shouldn't go to college, they'll come back a liberal and a Democrat or something?
Well, there's always been, there's a long history of this in the United States, you know, especially when, for first-generation students. You know, I think little Trump is at NYU, so, you know, I don't think he'll come back a liberal. But I think, I mean, my wife taught at Wake Forest, you know, probably now 30 years ago. It's a great school. She loved teaching it. She taught French. And she said she would talk to these students, and they would have really nice French accents. They're good students. And then one kid came back and said, "Ma'am," that's how they talked to her. "Ma'am, can I ask you a question?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "How am I supposed to talk to my parents about existentialism?" And she was, you know, she had been trained at Princeton in comparative literature and French and German, and she thought, "Oh shit, I don't know what to tell this kid." I mean, how do you talk to your parents about Sartre in that case? That's always been, and parents like, "I can't believe what they're teaching you." I mean, I wrote my senior thesis at Wesleyan on Sigmund Freud. I asked my mother to help me proofread it. Bad idea. Bad idea. She's like, "Really?" "No, it's just a book. It's just a book." And so I think that kind of difference is always there. What's happening now is that we have the federal government willing to use that difference for the vilification of teachers and students. It's happened before. Spiro Agnew did it, like nobody's business, you know. Yeah, and Ronald Reagan did it as governor of California more than as president. So there's often going to be that. What's different now is that they're using more tools to punish schools. And of course, they can't really punish the anthropology department because it's a Marxist feminist anthropology department, because they don't need federal dollars to spin a new version of settler colonial theory. So they punish the person doing Alzheimer's research or cancer research or, you know, et cetera. And it's so counterproductive and shooting ourselves in the foot. And I think the way to stop it is to keep reminding people of the many good things that happen in colleges and universities, and rather than always hearing about either it's their vocationalism or their, you know, the protests that some people don't like. There's a wonderful book, I think, although it's damning of Stanford in many ways. It's called How to Rule the World by Theo Baker, who's 22 years old. About his experience at Stanford, and it's really eye-opening. It's not about the radicalism. It's just like everyone wants to be a billionaire, and so no one really cares what they learn except if they learn how to cheat to become a billionaire. And you know, he writes very well. He's learned something, and it's instructive. And I think it's so important that colleges and universities, they don't lose their soul either to political fads or to government collaboration or alignment. That they try to cultivate independence of thought and the ability to act freely.
I love the idea of summer 2025. Do you have any statistics on how many kids actually signed up?
I don't. You know, we have, you know, Wesleyan will have dozens of students from Wesleyan, and then what we decided to do, since college presidents don't return my calls anymore. I don't know why. I'm a nice guy, but. So we had working with faculty at these other places, and they're doing their thing. So what we did was in the very beginning of the summer, we had a webinar. It was nicely attended with representatives of dozens or scores of schools, and like the Bush Center in Dallas. I contacted someone because it's very important that it not just be a Democrat thing, right? And like dumb Michael Roth, I wanted to call it Democracy Summer. Jamie Raskin has something called Democracy Summer. So like he called me. I was like, oh wow, Jamie Raskin's calling me. He's like, yeah, you're using the name that I used for the last decade. I said, well, those are good. They're good words. But all this, we had someone from the Bush Center talking about what they're doing in Texas. You know, conservative Republicans. We had people from the Community College Network in Cleveland. They're doing great voter registration work. We are working with the University of Maryland that brings people from all over the country to train them for doing poll watching and campaigning. So I don't know yet how many people from all these groups. And then at Wesleyan, you know, maybe Barnard was like this too. I mean, you know, there are kids who say, I don't need you to tell me what had. I have a guy who was working on the Plattner campaign and a junior at Wesleyan. I don't know if you know this guy. He says he's the digital director for the Democratic Senate candidate in Texas. He's 20, but he's got this job, you know, and they just go off and do these things in Michigan and Georgia and here in Maine. So my goal is just to remind people that if they don't use these democratic muscles, they atrophy, and then it's easier to control us. Okay, I thought you, right? Yes.
I would like to feel better about the universities.
How can I help you?
One of the things that, of all the sectors, and I've participated in the legal sector, the university sector, the government administration sector, I've touched on all of those, and I was very disappointed to see colleagues and institutions crumble in response to the authoritarian assault. But for the universities, I was particularly disappointed. The universities in America don't have a great track record. I think of my own alma mater that did not behave well during the Vietnam War, did not behave well during McCarthy. So American universities don't have a great track record. We have the history. We know what happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s. We know the universities. We know the blueprint that the Trump administration is following. We know it to a letter and a period at the end of the sentence. And for universities, who of all the sectors should be the most aware of that history and what happened then and how it's paralleling what is happening here, for the universities to take the I don't want to be the blade of grass approach is confounding for me, because I would expect the university sector to understand that is what happened, that is what is going on, and the only way to contest it is to stand together and all agree to be, the blades of grass at the height.
Well, if you ever apply for a university presidency job, I will be a big supporter. It's a very easy job. I agree with you. I think it's very disappointing. I struggled, but it's not. But I don't want us to be overly pessimistic in the sense that, okay, we're focused on these elite schools that have done nothing, but they're corporations. They're run by the board of trustees. They're very, very wealthy people. Probably don't worry so much about the university being attacked, but they worry about their own investment bank being attacked or because of their association. So there's a higher education alliance. There's a network of schools led by Mike Gavin, who is the president of Delta Community College in Michigan. Probably, I don't know if anybody's heard of Delta Community College, but he's put together dozens of college and university presidents who are speaking up. They're afraid because of the blueprint that they see unfolding in front of them. There are but Mike Gavin is an exception. The president of Trinity University in Washington, D.C., Patricia McGuire. It's a Catholic women's college oriented towards teaching nursing. She has been ferocious defender of our academic freedoms and freedom of speech. Chris Eisgruber at Princeton has been strategic, I think, but his interventions in defense of the autonomy of the sector, I think, have been very powerful. I think he sees me as being a loudmouth. I don't know why. I think I'm very demure, but not in a, that's exaggerated. We've relied on certain things, but I'd have appreciated when he has intervened. And then there are other schools that are really just trying to make the most of this. I mean, I do think there are schools that have commissioned reports about why political scholarship is bad, and they're trying to use this moment to raise their own profile in the eyes of the public, but also to become more of a better target for grant making from Washington. And a former ambassador met with me and said, the problem with you guys, presidents, is that most of your colleagues are playing ball with the administration because they don't think they'll ever pay a price when the administration is over and some Democrats come back to power, that there won't be retribution. If they speak up now, there might be retribution. But they don't think they say, so cost-benefit analysis. So he said to me, Roth, you should be naming them and calling them out and saying we'll be punishing you. And I don't know, Wesleyan is a small place, and that's not the best way to build alliances, in my view. But his point is that people collaborate with authoritarianism because it pays to do so. And you have to create incentives to not do it. Not just my incentives are moral. I think people should be ashamed of themselves. And so they should stand up for the values they said they believed in. Like 2 years ago, they said they believed in these things. So they should stand up for them. But that's not a material incentive, obviously. So I continue to do talks like this and to write essays and to try to appeal not so much to presidents and boards, but to students and faculty, who I do think will want to defend their democracy because they do see what's happening. And now,
let's give him a warm applause. Thank you. Thank you. Well, next week is our last and final one. Our speaker is from MIT. He's an astrophysicist, which I realize is 5-syllable words, so I know 2 of them now. He's going to talk about what is probably the most audacious science discovery project ever attempted by NASA and maybe by anyone in the world. So I hope you'll come here for our last great forum for the season. Thank you again, Michael, very much for coming. We all appreciate it.